Morning, Grace Church. 10 a.m. How you doing? Wasn't too good. All right. Not a great morning. Well, hopefully it gets a little better after me. Welcome to Grace. If you're new, my name is Scott. I'm one of the pastors. It's good to be with you. Good to see you. If you have your Bibles, turn to John 8. Scroll to John 8, whatever you got. We're going to be there in a moment. This is week 2 of the I Am series. We're looking at the book of John and the claims that Jesus said about himself. The world has a lot to say about Jesus, but what did he say about himself? Who did he say he was? So we're looking through each one of those I am statements leading up to Easter. So last week was week 1, I am the bread of life, and today we'll dig into his second claim, who he claimed to be. I want to start with a poll. I want to ask you a question. It's not rhetorical, don't talk. But you can raise your hand. I'm going to see how this goes. It went okay in the first. Raise your hand. Here's my question. And also, don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed by your answer. We're in church. It's all good. And there's no judgment. If you like scary horror movies, raise your hand. It's okay. You're so shy right now. You're like, it's okay. It's okay. I'm a hater. I hate them. So I just wanted to shame you all. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I do not like them. I'm going to tell you why in a moment. But there's 2 reasons why we don't watch these in my house. Not even, I mean, it should be the content, but the content. But also, I don't like them. And my wife is a scaredy cat. She's scared of Scooby-Doo. You think I'm exaggerating to make fun of her? I'm dead serious. She's scared of everything. So we don't watch these movies. Let me tell you why I don't like them. There's a big reason, and there's I'm going to make a radical claim. You think Jesus made it a radical claim? Watch out. Watch this. Hear me out. Scary movies, Hallmark movies. They're the exact same. They're the same thing. Here's why. They're horrifically predictable. Most of them. They're so predictable, so bad, so obvious. You know who the murderer is at the beginning. You see the thing played out. It's so bad. I recently saw a Geico commercial about making good decisions. Maybe you've seen this. And it's a small group of college kids, like in the middle of the night, running down this like dark road. And it's about how they're going to make decisions. And so they see this house that's just happens to appear to the left, and the lights are on. And one of them's like, maybe we should go in the house. There's lights on. It kind of makes sense. They're like, nah, you're crazy. And then this girl goes, oh, there's a running car with keys in the ignition. We could literally jump in and escape. And she goes, maybe we should do that. And the guy goes, are you nuts? As if that was a bad decision. Instead, they see it was either a shed or garage with like 2,000 chainsaws hanging from the ceiling. And they decide it's a brilliant idea to go hide behind there from the mass murderer trying to get to them. So dumb. So dumb. There's something about these movies where we know to be true. Have you ever heard, there's a phrase that says, there's never been a scary scene in a scary movie that occurs at noon. It just doesn't happen. When does it occur? Late at night and in the dark. It's always in the dark. Something that you and I know intuitively is that dark equals bad and light equals good. No, we didn't have to learn that truth. We just knew it. From an early age, we knew it. Jesus, in his second claim, after claiming he is the bread of life, he uses a metaphor, an illustration, an image of light to associate himself with. So I know she just read it, but I want to read it again together, and I want to go through verse 20. So let's read this carefully, John 8:12 to 20. When Jesus spoke again to his people, he said, I am the light of the world. There's the claim. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The Pharisees, they challenged him. They're calling him out. So here you are. You're appearing as your own witness, which is a no-no. Your testimony is not valid. Jesus responds. He answers. He says, even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid, for I know where I come from. I know where I'm going. You have no idea where I come from or where I'm going. You judge by human standards. I pass judgment on no one. But If I do judge, my decisions are true because I'm not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law, it's written that the testimony of two witnesses is true. Well, I am one who testifies for myself, but my other witness is the Father who sent me. So they ask him, where is he at? Where's your Father? You do not know me. You do not know my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. He spoke these words while teaching in the temple courts. That's significant. Near the place where the offerings were put. Yet no one sees him because his hour had not yet come. Jesus is doing something only he does. This is both a bold and just a significant, profound statement he has made for multiple reasons. What he's doing right now is known as he's using a parabolic image. Throughout the four Gospels, he tells these stories called parables. I'm sure you've heard of some of them. And what they do is they use something from everyday life, an image or a story that you can relate to in order to communicate a spiritual truth. So he uses something in everyday life that you know to communicate this truth that's spiritual. In this case, that's about him. The Pharisees, they were not happy with this. They would have been completely thrown off at this on different levels. And to them, you can't just show up and make these bold claims about yourself without someone else saying, yeah, that's true. You can't do that. That's a no-no. But Jesus does it, and he does it boldly, and he compares himself to light, and he says, I am the light. I am the source of light, and I am the light of the world. Now, as I said, maybe a movie popped up, a scary horror movie popped up in your head, and you immediately know that all those dark and nasty scenes are done at dark. And we know this, that darkness, there's something evil that happens in the dark. There's something bad about the dark. We just make that natural association. What does light do? Light exposes, it reveals, it shows you what's there, and dark conceals it. Light gives us a certain level of comfort. Light produces some amount of safety inside. What do you do when you're walking to your car and all the street lights are out? You get your phone out and you turn on the flashlight and immediately you sigh. The murderer isn't after me. And you're like, okay, I'm okay. My car's over here. I'm okay. And it's comforting. We just naturally know this. We naturally understand this. A lot of us don't remember this in this room, especially younger folk. Well, still me. I'm young-ish. But we know that we can walk into pretty much every room, turn on a light switch, and the light goes on. But what we don't remember, it was not too long ago that wasn't the case. 1879, 1880, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, electricity, and then in 1910, there was an adoption throughout the world, especially in the West, to say that we want electricity in all homes across the modern world. And it took some time to implement this throughout society in the world, but by 1945, in America, in 1945, 85% of American homes had electricity. The rest didn't. But 1960, it was like 98, 99%. 1960 is not that long ago. I mean, it is for me. I'm very young, but it's for some of you, you're like, yeah, I remember that. It's pretty recent. But for most of human history, while we think about light and we think about the light bulbs in the room or the room we can go on and switch on a light, the electrical light, that's not true throughout human history. Wasn't the case. As a matter of fact, light, historically, was mostly associated with what? Fire. Fire, right? And we know that fire has to be handled with care. We have to respect it. Every Christmas Eve, we have a candlelight service, and I'm over facilities, and I'm terrified that one of your children is going to take a light and set the stage on fire, and it's going to be an insurance nightmare. It's a terror of mine. Light can be dangerous when we associate that with fire. In 2018, I live in Alpine, in God's country, and in 2018, there was a huge fire in Alpine, not too far from our home. And dear friends of mine, they go here, the Mascaries, they were out of town, and I was talking to them, and I said, Joe, I'll go check on your house. So I got the boys together. My wife was at work, and we went to their house across town in Alpine, and went down and I watered their yard because that makes you feel good, even though that won't do anything by the time the fire gets there. And I was there for like a good 30, 40 minutes or so. And then I was like, okay, let's go home. And you go on this back road to where we lived. It was another house. And on the way home ahead, I could see the smoke and the raw fire. And I knew that by the time I get there, it's going to be really close. It's going to be on the side of the road. So I have two of my three boys with me, one here and one in the back. By the time we approach the fire, it's right there, literally right on the side of the road. And then I've never seen this before, ever. And I kid you not, the fire jumps the road in front of my face. And I in a split second, I didn't know what to do. I can't see in front of it. So I just pull one of these and I gassed it and I went through it. It was pretty terrifying. And then finally we got through it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. I said, boys, pack up, we're out of here. Forget God's country. No. Home was okay, but it was a scary moment. And we know that fire can be dangerous. And yet, this is what Jesus associated himself with. They weren't thinking electrical light, his audience. They were thinking that the scriptures and throughout the library of scriptures, what light represented, and that was mostly fire. This bold statement, to us, just the words alone are bold, but when we understand the context, it's even that much more bold. While he was saying this, it was during what was called the Feast of Tabernacles, also known as the Feast of Booths. It was the seventh and last feast that the Lord commanded Israel to observe. And the purpose was to remind God's people of God's deliverance and his promises, and his deliverance upon those promises is how he delivered them out of the wilderness into the promised land. And what he provided bread, he provided water of life, he provided them with his presence. Do you remember how? A guide to them through a pillar of what? Of fire. They would have remembered that. Also during this festival and this whole week that they're there was a ceremony, a special ceremony called the illumination of the temple, found in an old Jewish text called the Mishnah. This ceremony was 4 huge pillars. Some were 70 feet tall, they said. And they would light these on fire. And the temple sat up on a hill, and even if it was night and they were on fire, you'd walk in and it would be so bright it'd be like daylight. And you can see it from afar. You could see it all the way from even Galilee, they say. So in the context of them, remember, he's in the temple courts, and he's making this bold claim, and he knows what's on their minds. You're saying this? We do this ceremony to symbolize Yahweh, to symbolize God, to remember him, and you're claiming to be that to which we want to remember. It's a huge claim. It's a bold claim. Everyone listening to the words of Jesus would understand the significance of these words, especially with where he's at. The concept of God and light are inseparable throughout the library of scriptures. A lot of you know this psalm, Psalm 27:1. The Lord is my light and salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? This verse calls the Lord my light, emphasizing his guidance, the stronghold of my life, his protection and his salvation. Isaiah 60 is a common usage of the analogy of light. 19-20, it says, the sun shall no longer be your light by day, nor for brightness shall the moon give light to you, but the Lord will be to you an everlasting light, and your God, your glory. This passage points to the Lord as the eternal source of light, foreshadowing the themes that we later find in Revelation. There's so many verses. Remember in Exodus 3 and 4, where God's presence shows up, reveals himself to Moses as the burning bush, fire, light. Shows up at the very beginning. Genesis 1, the creation account. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was all over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, let there be light. and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night, and there was evening and there was morning, and then that was the first day. This is the introduction of the creation of the world, which at the time was covered in darkness, and God spoke, and there was light. The problem, darkness. The solution, light. In Genesis 1, God looked at the problem as he was creating the world, and he solved it within himself by providing light, and it established order in the world. Order. And what that means for us, this creation account in the context of John 8:12, is that what God did in creation, Jesus could do and is offering in your life, bringing order, bringing light to dispel the darkness. There's so many instances of light throughout the scriptures, and all of them, Isaiah, Exodus, many of the Psalms, there's so many from Genesis and on. Go read Revelation, it's there too. It's everywhere through the New Testament. And yet Jesus is standing here firmly rooted, boldly saying, I am not a light of the world, I am the light of the world. Those all those scriptures that you've heard all point to me. That's what he's saying. This is huge. It's an enormous, bold claim. And yet his audience struggled with it, right? The Israelites in Exodus struggled with it. Throughout the history of mankind have struggled with it. Old Testament, they struggled with following the light of Yahweh, of God, of looking at him as the source of light. They struggled with it. The Pharisees that Jesus is speaking to, they struggle with believing and trusting that he is the Messiah, that he is who he says he is. We struggle with this. This is true for all of us. We struggle with it. And yet, what was true for them is true for us. We worship lesser lights. There are so many things we look to, we point to, we're consumed with that are not the light of Jesus. As Christians, we struggle with this. Lesser lights. As a church, we're on a digital fast. It sucks. It's not fun. Grayscale on my phone. It's like death. Man, it's so difficult. We struggle. Why? Because we're so stimulated by something. And we're looking at something and scrolling through something. And if we're getting real about it for a second, we scroll through Zillow because we want the newer, better home. We look at things like shoes and Botox and all the stuff dudes want. We shop around for a new career because the grass is always greener. We're always looking for single. We're on dating sites looking for Mr. and Mrs. Perfect, et cetera, et cetera. We're always looking, striving, wanting, desiring lesser lights. And it's hard. We want the good life. We live in beautiful San Diego. We want the American dream. But every time we're scrolling or looking or hearing and seeking these things, it's just a small incremental lie that's fed to us over and over again. They're not bad things. Your car's not a bad thing. Your career's not a bad thing. Your money's not a bad thing. But we look at those lesser lights to do what only the light of the world can do. That's the problem. We're tempted constantly to depend upon these things, to seek these things. Instead of seeking and depending upon Christ, we look at the lesser lights and we put them on the altar and say, this is it. And ironically, you know who did that first to us? Read Genesis 3. It's there. He did that to Adam and Eve, but it means we're all susceptible. What are your lesser lights? What are the lesser lights that you seek, you put on the altar, and you go after? They're there. All kinds of things. In this political climate, we look at politicians. We worship celebrities and musicians and Instagram influencers. We worship pastors. We worship leaders. We look up to people, which isn't bad, but they become the source. It's not easy to look at ourselves and pause and reflect and say, what are those lesser lights I'm seeking, I'm looking for? But the beautiful thing happens when you do that. You then see your need for the source of the light, for Jesus. But it isn't easy, because we know that it implies certain things, a life devoted to a light of Christ. This whole concept shows up in John 3. And you know this because everyone knows John 3:16, right? Tim Tebow. But right after John 3:16 and 18, it says, whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. That's Jesus. This is the verdict. Listen, light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly what they have done has been done in the sight of God. And in this passage, Jesus is talking with Nicodemus, and he's saying that everyone that is just walking and feeding on their sin and their evil and the things that they're doing, they reject the light and they walk in the darkness gladly. They embrace their darkness. People don't want their darkness exposed. Chapter 3, it's not the first time this shows up in the Gospel of John, at the very beginning of John. And I know I'm throwing so many verses at you, but John 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that had been made. In him was life, and that life was what? The light of mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This passage connects the creation account from Genesis 3 that we just read with this concept of light that, in our context in the book of John, that the light of mankind, the light of the world, and that no darkness can overcome it. Can't overcome it, which means it can overcome the lesser lights. And then he introduces John the Baptist. Says there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness of light. And so there's this idea of witness and light that comes together. John the Baptist was clearly not the light. He was a reflection of the light. He was a witness to testify of the light. So you see what Jesus is saying about himself, what he's telling us, by him telling us who he is then telling us who we are. We are like John the Baptist. Our roles, our jobs as disciples and followers of Christ is to be reflections of, witnesses of the light. That is our job. Matthew 5 says it. You're the light of the world. You're to let your light shine before others. But the temptation is always to go to the lesser lights, always. So what happens is, even as Christians, we chase these other things, and we tend to reflect the things that we chase. So you're hot in politics on social media. Are you reflecting the light of Jesus? You're getting into these fights with neighbors or friends or family or whatever. Are you reflecting the light of Jesus? You're going to reflect the thing that you're chasing after. Easier said than done. We know that in order to be witnesses, to testify of the light, we need to combat sin. We need to combat our attitudes. We need to grow in holiness. But we learn throughout the scriptures is that holiness will grow in the light while sin grows in the dark. And so we keep it hidden. And we feed it. And we've learned that when we're walking in the Spirit, walking in the light, walking with Christ, and we're in the Word and we're communing with Him, we're feeding holiness. We're feeding the light. Otherwise, we're walking in sin and we're feeding it, and on we go, and we grow in those directions. Now, when I bring this up, I'm almost afraid to bring this up. If you're new, there is an obvious move of God at this church. That's a bold thing to say. It is true. I've been here for 25 years this summer. I've never seen God move like he's moving right now. Something crazy is happening in this church. It's the Lord. People are growing both deep and wide. We're growing numbers like crazy, but people are being discipled. They're becoming biblically literate. They're growing in their sanctification. It is crazy what God is doing here. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. So if you're new, you're like, okay, every pastor said, be around us. Just watch. Just watch. I'm not kidding. We've gone from 230 people to over 900 every week. Here's my fear. My fear is that some will go. They're going to come and walk in. They're going to sit in the very seat you're in right now, and they're going to leave, and they will always be in darkness. That's my fear. So many people. Not all those people are being connected. Not all those people are meeting Jesus, receiving the gospel. It can't be. Or can it? But that's my fear. That the very seat you're sitting in, next service, the previous service, there's someone living in darkness and will never find the light of Christ. We've talked about this on staff. I think we're reaching a lot of Christians. I don't know if we're reaching the lost. I'm just being honest. I don't know if we are. Some people are dying inside. They're destroyed inside. They're rotting to the core. They're blinded by darkness. And so I'm terrified that they will never meet the person of Jesus Christ, receive and live out the gospel. I'm scared of that. If you're a true believer, if you're a follower of Christ, you've placed your faith in Jesus and you said, I'm going to live devoted to you, your lordship over my life. You know your heart. You know where you're at. You cannot love your sin and walk in the light at the same time. It's just true. You can't. If you're walking in darkness as a believer and you don't feel deep conviction over your sin, you're in a dangerous place. A dangerous place. I want to pray for you. You're in a dangerous place. Sometimes we just need to feel the weight of our darkness. The weight of it needs to overwhelm us, overcome us. We need to be at the end of ourselves. I almost want you to experience the pain of it so that it would do something in you. Now, if you don't know Jesus, if you are unsaved, this isn't a judgment. Out of every way I could love you, I will say you are blind and you're in darkness. And brother or sister, the good news is that Jesus has an open invitation for you. Like he's waiting for you. Saying all the sin that you're wrapped up in, I died for that. I paid for that. That's why I came. You're here hearing this message, and the reality is the gospel is true and Jesus is true. And when he says he's the light of the world, it's true. Will you believe it? But again, it's scary because that means exposing yourself. It means there's some level of your wounds and your dysfunction and your bitterness and your sin and your anger and your attitude and these things, at some level that vulnerability needs to come out. That's what that means. And so that's scary. We don't want to do that. But here's the truth, that the light of Jesus that he's talking to, that he's referring to, it not only just reveals your flaws, but it transforms them. That's what the gospel does. The gospel is redemptive. He will redeem it. He will heal it. But it has to be brought into the light. The purpose of the light is to show what's there. And then Jesus transforms us as we follow him. I've seen people hide their darkness, keep it hidden in a closet. I'm terrified of, I have 3 teenagers, and I'm terrified for them. I'm terrified for young people because they're so connected digitally. But are they face-to-face, confessing sin, having hard conversations, working on their personal sanctification, saying, I want to be discipled and follow Christ. I need the light of Jesus in my life. Are they doing that embodied with people? Because that's where the magic is, not a DM. Exposure for exposure's sake is not just the thing, it's to find freedom. Jesus does not condemn confessed sin, he died for it. So when you walk in the light of Christ, darkness then has no power over you. This is John Stott. The light of Christ is not merely a light that shows the way, but the one that transforms the soul. It does. So what is Jesus saying? You cannot see without me. Without me, you are blind. Jesus is saying that you cannot understand yourself without me. Everything you deal with internally, you won't get it until you encounter my light. Jesus is saying that you cannot heal without me. You're trying. Some things can help temporarily, but it won't be truly healed without me. Jesus is saying that you can try to fight sin and temptation without me, but without me, you won't. Jesus is saying that you cannot find purpose without me. And when you wake up and you're saying, what am I doing with my life? That's going to continue until you walk with him. Jesus is saying that you cannot find freedom without me, with whatever you're in bondage with whether it's mental, PTSD, anxiousness, physical, whatever it is, you cannot find freedom without the light of Jesus. He is saying, I am the light of the world. You want freedom from darkness? Follow me. That's what the text says. Follow me. That's what he said. The light of Christ doesn't just expose our darkness, it drives it away. Charles Spurgeon. Christ is the light of the world, not merely the light of the church, nor a select few, but the light of the world. He is the great sun, and wherever his beams fall, there is light. He is the light of all men, but they who will not come to him to walk in darkness and will know nothing of the true light. So church, if Jesus is who he says he is, if he is the light of this world, we must confront our darkness. We must confront our darkness head on. Confess it, expose it, and kill it. It's only then we can truly walk in his light. I didn't plan this morning, but this morning I felt compelled to just pray for people. So if you need to bring your darkness and expose it, I don't have all the answers, but together we can bring it to the feet of Jesus. I'm going to be up and I just want to pray for people. Our prayer partners will do the same. Come to any of us and let's spend some time dragging our darkness to the feet of Jesus and walking in his light. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, this claim you made is gripping. It's not only bold, it's piercing. And I pray that it would pierce us. I pray that it would puncture our heart and it would compel us to walk with you, to commune with you, to confess to you, to bring everything to you, to surrender to you, and to say, you are Lord. You are the light of the world. We love you. I love you. You are the light of this church. You are Lord over this church. And Father, as a church, may we be a light for the lost. Not just for the Christians that are coming, but for those who have no idea who you are because they're blinded by the darkness. Bring light. Bring light through your gospel. Bring light through your presence. And may we reflect it. In Jesus' name.